Buongiorno Mondo, happy Ferragosto weekend, and welcome back to 15 with Fosca, the podcast. In today's episode, I continue my conversation with Eleanor Walker, art historian and British expat living in Florence. Last week, we heard about Eleanor's journey to Italy and how she took the leap right in the midst of the global pandemic for what was supposed to be just a few months. Stay right where you are to hear what happened and to learn more about the bittersweet reality of finding a career, community, balance, joy, and ultimately yourself here in Italy. Grazie mille e buon ascolto. That's the takeaway, people.
Always turn up early.
Oh my gosh,
so I had time to read. But anyway, my heart was in my mouth, and we had this interview, and actually and then we had the interview, and then I was offered it, and so then I started in September 21 with Timothy Verdon.
Right.
He was there,
And we had a small group.
It
was an experimental group.
Yeah, it was tiny.
And then we kept getting bigger. We kept sort of increasing it until we returned to normality the year after, the academic year after.
Well, I remember the art history class, we had 13 students, 1-3, and it was great.
Because
it was great.
Because Eleanor is used to like 45, taking 40 kids around the Uffizi, which in Florence in high season, which is not always easy.
It's gotten harder. I will say that's something else we can talk about, but it's like I think
it's very problematic. I'd actually like to hear your opinion on this because we talked briefly about it. It's like Florence has come back like stronger than ever before, and with a kind of like people are coming and don't show any signs of not wanting to come.
It's this sort of hate-love relationship that Florence has.
Let's talk about that a little.
Yeah, because I have it as well, because obviously working in art history, you take great joy, and I'm not the only one, who works in sort of art history and tourism and teaching, education.
Right.
And you have great joy with the city that you love, and you understand why it's a place that people come. But it is quite extraordinary, the numbers in which the city is experiencing. And, just trying to get any booking to get into a museum at the moment. I've had to make reservations for places I have never had to make reservations before.
I know.
Never, ever. And then there are also the restrictions on the size the group can be with any one educator or guide. Is really hard. And I feel like there should be... And I don't know if this is going to be, taboo to say, but there should be some distinction between a university group and a tourist group.
I agree.
Because
no, I agree 100%. Or residents.
Yeah.
Or students in general, high school students, people who live here.
Yeah. It's really because I had this issue with obviously the Uffizi, because also architecturally, it's not designed to take the amount of people that go through those doors. So I completely understand why there are these restrictions, but there has to be some kind of, I don't really know how, but there has to be some resolution in which it is not, I think I've got more grey hairs every time I go and take a group to the Uffizi, because every time, the staff are stressed and get snappy and angry, and you're stressed and you get snappy and angry, and you're like, look, last time I did this, I wasn't held to this rule. And they say, well, these have been the rules since 2021. You're like, okay, they've been the rules since 2021, but now is the only time you're actually really strictly enforcing them. Right. So, for example, I had a group of 18 students that I had to take, and the maximum number that you can take with any one educator is 15. And trying to get everybody through the door as a group it took me, I think, about 45 minutes to get the students through.
And that's a shame because they're here to learn.
They're here to learn, and and we're not going through every single painting in the museum.
Obviously,
we were going to
do a close study of
the Leonardos. We're going to go to one room, or they're there to learn. It's part of their education. It's part of their course. And yes, of course, with tourism, it's also education, and it's also but it's. The angle is different, and the sort of scope of learning is different in the sense that these students are here for a longer period of time. Right. They're only coming to this museum for an hour to come and see, a selection of paintings rather than a longer, educational tourist visit.
Right.
So it's and I've had to reserve for Palazzo Davanzati.
I know.
Which is bizarre.
I know.
I mean, it's great in the sense that
it's wonderful.
It's
always been one of my favorite museums, but like I never go to museums in Florence. I end up never going because it's too hard.
So hard.
It's so hard.
So hard, and it takes the joy. And
Right.
the number of, I mean, I can count on both hands the number of times where I have been offended, abused by, the staff who also are offended and abused. You know, there's this kind of antipathy, and I'm always kind of trying to go and trying to say, what do you need me to do?
Let me help you.
How
let me
do
help
I
make your life easier.
Exactly. And then having to turn on a sixpence and say, welcome to this amazing museum full of incredible art. Let's go and to really it's performing, and you have to. I think a lot of people see my life here and think, God, you're living the dream.
Oh, I know.
Aren't you living the dream?
Yeah.
You're teaching history of art. And yes, to a certain extent, I am.
It is a dream.
It is a dream. But there are moments when you're like, shouldn't be this hard.
So what is the thing that's been hardest for you living in Italy?
Ooh, security.
Job security?
Yeah. Job security, because it doesn't really exist. at least for me as a foreigner, and for me as working in the arts, and for me as a young person. So there's a very different, from my experience, there's a very different attitude towards careers here, and it plays into what I see as the Italian approach to careers. Definitely generally speaking,
okay.
but that your job is not your be all and end all.
It doesn't define you.
It doesn't define you. And whenever I speak to Italians, they never really ask that. Their first question is never, what do you do? What's your job?
Rarely.
Yeah. They're more interested in the life that you live around your job, which is a great thing. It's very commendable.
So different from the way we're raised.
So different, and it's probably it's so different from the way that I see myself as well. I put quite a lot of value on my career and a lot of value on my job. I really have to enjoy what I'm doing. Always have been quite picky in a way as to what job I take next, because I really invest myself, and probably a little too much in my jobs.
I mean, I think it's. I'm the same way, and so I get it, and I think a lot of it is. Much of it can be personal, but a lot of it is really societal. Yeah,
and I think, in the UK, I see my friends are doing, and they have a very different approach, which is still kind of embedded in me, where you progress, you move.
Right.
If the job is not offering you enough, you move on. Or you request more, or you say, look, this isn't working for me. And maybe it's a millennial thing as well. Maybe it's something that my generation does. If this isn't offering me enough, I'm going to move on. So there's this kind of very different attitude, and in Italy, that does not exist.
No,
There's very little movement within a workplace.
So hard.
And I sort of get it, because once you get the job with the contract that you want, because there is no security, why would you let that go? Why would you risk and do something else and try something that's the riskier option, but maybe the more rewarding one? I totally understand it, but it, as a flip side, it means that I never really feel that I'm secure here, in my career, in my financials, and as a result, I work 3 jobs at the moment. I don't have a day off in my week, and I'm not the only one who does that. And I choose it. I choose it.
Yeah.
That's, my decision.
But I'm so glad that you're saying this, and I really hope people are listening, because I'm getting a little tired of seeing all these picture-perfect portrayals on Instagram of people your age who are living here. I don't know how the hell they're doing it, because they're really living the dream.
Yeah.
Whereas, you and I are living in the reality, which can have dream-like qualities, but it's reality. Yeah. Italy is reality, people. It's not all Prosecco and spritz on a terrace. So I don't know how these people are making money. I don't know what they're doing, but I'm really grateful that you're coming here and talking about the difficulties, because, people have this, your friends say, oh, you're living the dream, or people say to me, oh, no. The financial career thing has been a problem for me since I've lived here.
Yeah.
And I hope it won't be a problem for you. I do think things are changing in the society because I don't think your generation is willing to put up with what my generation put up with. And I'm speaking about Italians here, not foreigners. So I'm hoping that there is going to be a change. There's a change going on a global level. Eventually, maybe it'll get around to Italy. I don't know. But I really think it is important that you're raising these questions because living here and choosing to live here is not an easy choice. I think people see it as like, oh, you know, you're living la dolce vita, but you know, you're actually doing everything you can to maintain a minimum
a minimum
right?
to support yourself.
Right.
And you know, it pays you back in certain ways. I've had amazing experiences, and you know, there are moments where I'm, you know, if I'm early for a class and I can have a cappuccino by the Duomo, and you think, my God, I am so lucky. This is what I'm doing. This is my Monday. You know, and I try, I think, to make myself do that more often because I get so kind of bogged down with the difficulties of living here. Because also, Florence is. It's interesting whenever I say to people I live in Florence, I have two reactions. Some say, oh, that's amazing, what a beautiful place to live. And normally people say that. But then I had one recently where they were like, oh, that's an interesting place to choose to live.
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. You say that. Why do you say that? And they're like, well, it's just a tourist city. You know, it's full of, you know, it doesn't strike me. And they said it doesn't really strike me as a place that you'd want to live. And I thought, gosh, that's so interesting that you say that, because there are definite sides of it that are very livable and really enjoyable.
Extremely livable, and I have to say, like, as somebody who's lived here for a long time, chosen to raise my child here, I see a lot of redeeming qualities in living here. Yeah. But on the surface, if you only go, you know, to the downtown and you only see those realities, you know, you have this very distorted lens. And so what is the best? So what keeps you here? I mean, what is the best thing about living here in all this, you know, precarity and all this, you know, all the challenges? What is the great thing about living here?
I think at the moment it seems to me that I can have a really good quality of life here. So yes, okay, the rent is definitely more expensive than you think it's going to be. Everyone thinks that living in Italy or living in Florence, the rent is going to be cheaper. It's not.
It's gone way. It's also
really expensive.
Everything's gone way up.
Yeah, it's expensive to live. It is expensive to live, but you can still live a life. Yeah. So you know, I definitely go out and eat way more than I would if I was living in London, or in the UK. Full stop. You know, okay, I don't own a car, but I walk everywhere. Exactly. And the public transport is, one thing I'm always surprised by it is how affordable the public transport is. You know, I'm always shocked the other way, culture shock, going back to England when I have to pay.
How much does it cost for the tube?
The tube, I think it's like around, I don't actually know, but because you just pay on contactless, so you never really clock it, but you get the bill at the end of the week, and it's like 30 quid or 40 quid for a week of travel.
Because here it's like €1.50, and it's
I want to say
like an hour and a half.
So when I was living there, everything's changed. €70. Yeah, it's €70 now,
and it's 90 minutes of transportation.
Whereas in the UK before, when I was living there, it was like £2.60 one way, and then for I think it changed for rush hour, of course. I think it's gone up, but I honestly haven't travelled enough to know. But I know that things are more expensive. Right. And I know this because when I go out and eat in London, when I go back and see my friend, because my brother lives in London, there's lots of and I'm not London-centric, but I tend to, you know, spend most of my time in London. I'm shocked at how expensive it is to eat out in London. So when I was living there, I would expect if I ate out at a normal restaurant, maybe somewhere around £40 for your meal. £40, maybe 50, but 50 was a lot for me. Yeah. So I'd always have in my head it will be somewhere around £40. When I ate out twice at different places last summer, they were both £70. Yeah. And I was like, £70 for a nice meal, but nothing crazy expensive. Yeah. Whereas living out here, you can have a really nice meal.
Yeah.
You know, the pasta dish is probably €10.
Yeah, you can still eat. Thank goodness there are still places here where you can eat and drink.
You can still
and not break the bank.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There are still places you can eat out here, and you can have a really nice, experience with some friends that's very local and not sort of, you don't have to, spend an arm and a leg to go out. So I'm out a lot more, and I eat out a lot more than if I would when I was living at home. So I think that's probably why I stay, because I'm living on my own here. I can't really see myself at the moment being able to afford somewhere to rent in England on my own, especially working in the arts. So there are lots of things that for me right now, in my point in my career and in my life, I've got a really good quality of life here.
So it makes sense. So
it makes sense.
And then we'll see at the end of the year, when you do your checks and balances.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to stay quite realistic. Also, because this is the other thing that I will say about Florence, it's very transitive. So my friendship group has changed a lot each year, because people come and go.
Yeah.
People study and then they go.
Right.
People come for a year and then they go.
Yeah.
So my oldest, in inverted commas, friends I've known for 3 years, and we're like the oldies of choir, because we've been here for 3, I've been here for 4, but she's been here for 3, so that's the other thing. So you do kind of sort of take a checks and balance at the end of the year, and you think, okay, how is everything looking? Am I still going to stay? Is it worth my while? What am I getting from this now?
Yeah.
So I really just kind of do that, and if it works, then I stay.
Exactly. And I think but you make a very good point, which is that you can feel like a human being.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? I think when you're young, and I think it's very typical in both of our cultures, which are obviously very similar but different. There is this, when I was your age, it was similar, but so much of your identity is tied up in what you do, how much money you make.
Yeah.
What Americans my age and younger are doing. I can't do that. I don't have the financial means either. It's just a different world here.
Yeah.
And so I think, when my friends from the US or friends from other places in the world come and they say, oh, things are so cheap here, you can get wine and you can get like a really good, you and I can go out for a drink and we can spend, maximum, I don't know, like €20 if we get a couple of drinks each, because we know the right places to go. But you can't do that in a lot of other places in the world. So you've had a hard day, you've had a long day, you're tired, whatever, but you can go out with a friend and sit in a piazza and have a nice drink, and there's sunlight,
Exactly.
And so those are things that kind of keep you going.
Exactly.
And then you're like, all right, we'll see how things are in a couple of months.
And of course, because you go to not the same places all the time, but the places that you want to go to.
Your people.
And they know
who
you are, and they're very chatty, and because they know that you also live here, there is this kind of, you don't go in and say, I'll have, the usual, that kind of stereotype, but there are people who and they sort of, they joke with you a little bit, or, they give you that sense of community because everybody, is in this kind of melting pot together.
Exactly.
So, there's the bar that we go to, and the guy, we know the service is going to be ridiculously slow, but he's like a really good person and a sweetheart.
And the drinks cost
And the drink is,
it's really
€5.
Right. You can't beat it. So you're like, whatever, it's fine. I'll wait a few minutes.
Yeah.
So, we're coming to the end of our conversation, which is weird because it really flew by, and I have all these questions that I wanted to ask that I didn't ask. But I want to go back to the problematic, the thing that we as residents have the most difficulty with, which is visiting places that we'd like to see, right? So people always ask me, especially first-time visitors to Florence, oh, what should I absolutely do? What shouldn't I miss? Also, in light of what we were just talking about, the difficulties now in getting reservations. Some people I know people who are coming in September, they might be too late to get Uffizi reservations.
That's crazy.
So what are some places that you would recommend as an art historian and as somebody who lives here? Are there places where you think that, first-time visitors to Florence or to Italy should see no matter what? Like,
oh my gosh.
do what you have to, but make sure or just even favorite places of yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first one that does come to mind, just because it's a beautiful museum, is the Museum of the Duomo.
Yeah.
That's behind the Duomo. I will say this, please do not join the queue to enter that building, because whilst it is an impressive space, you can't walk around that building really very much, and I really think it's such a waste of people's time. You know, if there's no queue or if it's a short queue, fine, go in, but do not queue around the block to get inside.
It's terrible.
It's
when you
really,
see that.
it's awful, and you know, it's just not worth it. I kind of want to go to everybody at a certain point, you know, down this line, like, come back tomorrow. Like, don't queue for 2 hours to get inside, because you're not going to see much, and it's more impressive outside. Sorry, Florentine, but it's more impressive on the outside.
You only have a couple of days, or even one. You know, it's
so don't do
sad.
that. And you know, go to the Duomo Museum, because I think you'll learn far more about the art and the artists who've worked with the Duomo or produced things with it, or how it's built. You know, how the dome is built. It's far more informative, and you know, as you know, it's recently been redone, that museum. So
one of the most beautiful museums I've ever seen.
It's a really kind of immersive museum. It feels like a sort of more what I would imagine an American approach to a museum.
Yeah.
And you know, there are moments where you kind of can really have some peace and quiet in there. There's masterpieces by Michelangelo, Donatello. You know, it's architectural, it's art, it's sculpture, it's, you know, there's painting, there's, you know, Renaissance, and then there's, you know, 1800s, you know, because, spoiler alert, the facade is not as old as the building, you know. So you know, it's a really fantastic museum, and whilst maybe there are crowds, you know, it's got the original baptistry doors in.
Yeah, you can see everything, and so it makes
everything.
sense. It's also beautiful, a magnificent space.
There's also space, so if there are big groups, you can stand back, or you can look at something else, or you can listen to the choir music that's playing, or you can go to one of the rooms upstairs and look down on the space. So you actually have space in that museum to breathe. Yeah. So I think it's just been so brilliantly restored and curated. So I think it's a great space. And you know, there are 2 ticket offices. People do not queue at the one by the bell tower. There is one just by the baptistry, which never has a queue. So you know, there are options. So I think that is brilliant. And one that actually is recently really opened, and I've only been once, but I think it's quite nice, is Orsa Michele.
Oh yeah.
Because they have an amazing view of Florence. It's quiet.
Yeah. It's
sculpture. There's an amazing church underneath that you can see, gorgeous church. Historically, that building is so important for Florence.
So important, all the guilds. You've got basically the history of Florence in that one space, and you're right. It's not on people's immediate list.
Yeah. So it's a great space. I really like it.
Yeah.
It's a quiet space in the center of Florence as well.
It's right in the heart of the city. It's where the beating heart of the city.
Yeah, and so you can see the sculptures sort of up close, the originals, and then you can see their replicas in the niches underneath. So you can sort of have this sort of dual experience,
which is really
the history
nice.
of Florentine sculpture. So it's great. It's a lovely museum that's just recently all been kind of reopened and redone, and I think they've done a great job. So those are 2 places that immediately come to mind that are in the centre and easy to get to, and that provide something different. The final third one these are all sort of sculpture based, is the Bargello.
I love the Bargello.
The Bargello. So the Bargello is the main sculpture museum of Florence, and it gets somewhat busy, but not hugely.
It never gets that kind of prohibitive, line that you have at the Uffizi, that you have at the Duomo, and that you have at the Accademia.
Exactly. You don't have to queue to get in. Maybe there's a slight wait because of security check, but it's and you have Michelangelo, Donatello, you have everybody, and you have this incredible, and it's huge.
It's a beautiful space too, and they're also really eclectic collections. So if you're interested in things like military history, or coins, things like that, you can go.
Coins. They have glazed ceramics. They have they have all these amazing Islamic metalwork and glasswork and ceramics, and so they have this kind of Islamic, the history of the trade with the East, which is really cool. So obviously, it's a beautiful space, historic space, the old law courts, the old prison that became the law courts, so all these things, So and I think they do concerts in the courtyard in the summer.
They do. It's a great space, and you can also, I think you've made 3 excellent recommendations, because we forget, and I forget, that there are options for me. You know,
Yeah.
when I have free time, I would love to go to a museum, but I get so intimidated.
Yes, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I haven't even been to the Speculum since
No,
they
well,
reopened
neither
it.
have I. Neither have I.
I've heard it's phenomenal.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I'm waiting because a friend of mine has promised to give me a guided tour. So maybe I'll call you. I'll call you when we do that.
Please.
But for the first few weeks, you know, I walked by, and that's my neighborhood. That's your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so usually tourists don't make it that far.
They make
And
it to Palazzo Pitti and then
and
it all
I saw
stops.
lines, and I was like, why are there lines at La Speculum? No, that belongs to us. Anyway, so what's next for you, Eleanor? I know that we have to still do the checks and balances at the end of the year, and maybe you'll come back and we can talk about that. But so for now, what's in the works that you want to tell us about?
Yeah, I mean, for now, you know, I want to stay. I'm very happy here. I'm very lucky with where I live and with my community. So I'm doing what I can to stay. I've recently been involved with a very different side of Florence, which is the modern contemporary side of Florence. So I've been working with Chris Levitt's collection, which is a collection of female art predominantly. Female art, I mean art by women,
Yes.
Or I should just really just say art.
Exactly.
You know, it doesn't really matter. But anyway, and that's, you know, a very different side of collecting and the art scene in Florence, which does have a strong but small sort of modern and contemporary side. And so that is something I've been working on. And so the museum that Chris is opening in the south of France, so it's not Florence, but it's easy to get to.
Not that far.
Not that far, just above Cannes. So that's something that I've been working really hard on for the last few months, and that's opening in the middle of June. So
Wonderful.
yes, so that's something that I'm really looking forward to in the summer. And yeah, I mean, I think this year probably will bring quite a lot of change while staying in Italy. It will bring quite a lot of change. So I think at the moment I'm just trying to weather that storm a little bit and see what happens and which opportunities come from that. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Okay, well maybe you'll come back.
Yes.
And you'll tell us where you are, and we can do a little. Okay.
Yeah.
What do we think? Are we still thinking Florence is winning? Or are we thinking maybe it's time to go back to London? I do think though that you're right in sort of taking it, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Also because as we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, I do think that everywhere in the world right now, there's just so much, you know, every day we're just inundated with just so much.
Yeah.
Just there's no other way to say it. There's just so much going on.
Yeah.
So much.
And it's quite nice to just sort of, you know, take it day by day or month by month or whatever and just be like, okay, this is where I am right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you can't do that approach forever, you know, because at some point you have to start sort of being like, okay, well, where am I going to, you know, stay for longer or plan for longer or be more financially secure? But for now, you know, it's sort of, this is what is working and this is how I'm paddling in the storm.
Yeah.
So you just have to, I think you just have to, you know, just keep swimming.
Yeah. No.
You just really have
but
to.
It's true. And I think though that I'm really grateful to you for coming today, first of all, because I love chatting with you. But I'm really grateful because you have given a very clear picture of the reality of life here, which is, you know, at times absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
And, you know, so beautiful that, you know, even you're describing this bittersweet moment. You know, you're up at the top of Piazza Michelangelo, you're on the phone with your family, you can't be with them. You know, the city below you that's, you know, magnificent but deserted.
Yeah.
Right? And this moment of like, okay, but, you know, maybe this is where I need to be right now. And so I do think that that's a healthy attitude. I think we do have the tendency, certainly as an American, my tendency is to plan everything.
Yeah.
And I've done that all my life, and to sort of, oh, well, I should be here by the time I am. I should be this, or I should be that.
Well, I definitely have that whenever I go see friends in the UK, because they all at very different like life stages to me, which is, you know, nothing, it's not a race, you know, everybody does things differently. But, you know, you go home and you think, you can't help. I'm someone that always compares myself to other people. I'm very bad at doing that and being, you know, quite overly conscientious of should I be doing this at this point. But I think, you know, you just have to tread your own path And if that path leads to Florence, and I think it's just I think also because there is so much media on Florence, and and Italy, life in Italy, and it's been so romanticized, and thinking
especially post-pandemic.
Yeah, and it's just there's this kind of hyper tourism that's I think also been kind of worsened by TikTok and all of these things.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't have TikTok, but all of these things, and I think to a certain extent, part of it is true. Yes, you can get this spritz for that price, and yes, you can get a glass of wine through the wall if you really want to, but there is the reality of living. I think that's probably the biggest shock that people have if they're moving here, that they think that life is going to be just the most easy, beautiful thing. And it can be at times, but at the end of the day, it's still a life, and it's still a city, and you still have to pay your bills. So.
On that note, true, very true. No, but I think I'm really
without being too much of a downer.
Right? No, because it's true, and I'm glad that we talked about this, because I think that what comes through on social media, especially for your generation, those of us who are older probably know a little better, but is that there's this endless source of Prosecco, and you can just sort of sit around and look at beautiful vistas all day long if you move here. And frankly, if you can do that, more power to you. You can probably do that anywhere in the world. But for those of us who are really invested in the country, really invested in the culture, really invested in having careers and lives here, I want to congratulate you. I think you've done a great job. I mean, you came at the darkest time, and you've managed to find community, career, a beautiful life for yourself, and so you should be happy. And we'll see how you feel a few months from now, but I think you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you.
And I'm very happy that you came to talk to us today.
It was a pleasure. Yeah, I'd happily come again.
All right, we'll come and have an update. We'll have an update in a few months, so you can tell everyone where you are.
Okay.
Va bene?
Va benissimo.
Grazie mille.
Grazie.
Alla prossima.